But it does mean that I believe in the longer term, competition gives rise to, if you have fair competition, less cost, and more entrepreneurship and innovation.
How much less cost can you get than the administrative costs of Medicare?
Well, right now Medicare, as you know, goes bankrupt in 2017. And so it's maybe less costly, but it's going bankrupt. So now in our plan, we extend it to 2022 at least. But what we do know is that, for example, and there's many good things about single payer, but we fund, for example, England and Canada, because they buy our drugs at 1/3 the cost on average that we buy the drugs at.
And why is that exactly?
It's wrong. It's because we can't get it past the Senate. I have voted for reimportation of our drugs we sell overseas. I've also voted for importing those drugs from those countries that have similar FDA standards. So here's the other thing I found. When I ran the Navy's $70 billion program and we decided as a 3-star what to buy, what not to buy, we would buy a ship. And there's a single buyer, single shipyard. And what we found is a ship that was $1.2 billion, we finally canceled it, even though I tried to do it in the Navy as a 3-star. I cut it from 36 ships to 12. We finally canceled it on the Armed Services Committee because it was costing $5.5 billion. So it isn't that it's wrong, because look, Medicare, Medicaid are good necessary programs, but Dartmouth University has said 1/3 is wasteful and inefficient that's in it. Now, I don't know if that study's perfect at all, but when you have San Francisco paying $16,000, they are $8,000 per person for Medicare, and then you have Miami doing $16,000, you've got to bring about a better system. Look, if we can't get the insurance companies out of this monopoly, then we've got to try something else. But I wanted to be upfront that I felt the Massachusetts healthcare plan was a model to try to endeavor to better control costs in the longer term. I know not everybody will agree with me, but I won't say what our inspector said, as in July, August, September, we went everywhere when single payers asked a question, because I would often show up a week later. And they said, he says he's for single payer because he says it's on the table. We needed leaders in the Senate shaping the health care bill, not kind of kidding people by saying everything's on the table.
Well, we'll move on. You've been very active on the issue of education, I see. And I've read very little mention, actually, of No Child Left Behind in your position papers, except that you would modify the assessment standards for students with disabilities, which is actually a big issue that we've covered here at Voices. Many teachers and parents have even more issues with the act. Do you have more to say on No Child Left Behind?
Without a question. We have a whole 7-page letter on this that we send people. I was very involved in 9 amendments in No Child Left Behind to reauthorize it in the committee. Unfortunately, it's not first and foremost on our platter right now, and I said that to George Miller, head of the Education Committee, when I brought him for my second of 38 summits into the district and brought the 2 subcommittee chairmen up for 2 other ones, is that the most important thing to do in it, which George Miller didn't agree until he came to my district, was to change how we assess schools. I agree with President Bush's actually concept of accountability. I spoke of that earlier. I believe in accountability for investment. But they measure it wrongly. And in fact, Pennsylvania, a year ago in January, qualified for the new way. We normally come in AYP and we say 3 kids have to pass. They don't bother about the most gifted. They'll make it easily. But they don't reach beyond their grasp, nor the least gifted, because they'll never make it. So they focus on 3 in arts and everything else falls the same. What we say is a longitudinal value-added model. We know children don't come in all gifted equally, and often they come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. So the modeling that's in this bill to redo, which will also work for IDEA, special ed, is does the 60 get to 65? I mean, I'm making this up, and the numbers up. Does this child, so you can measure each child, and then when they all have a problem, that's where you put your money to fix that curriculum. But what we also have to do, and we try to get 25% of the grade to be flexible in the high schools themselves. I've also had amendments in there for security of schools. For example, we know when women go to campuses, I think it's 1.5 out of every 5 is raped or sexually assaulted, and the majority of those is in their first year. So I've been the sponsor of campus safety resolutions every year. But we don't even know how to measure, because every school determines what is bullying or etc. So I want standards for that, because you need a secure environment. But I also have amendments in there that everyone doesn't go to a wonderful Penn State. Some of them are very good and very great quality of life to go to an artisan's, a technical school or something. And so I have it now to where vocational, if you take vocational, you can, with these grants, can be given credit to go to a community college and all. And also, Title I just has to be much more funded. And second language, we have to also recognize is something we need to give, we shouldn't just punish them right away. So there's many things in this I've been involved in.
I have a question that's probably near and dear to your heart because it affects veterans, but I read that you support improving and expanding the program that would actively place veterans in elementary school classrooms. Getting vets employed is clearly one of your priorities. But Veterans Affairs has treated almost 115,000 soldiers and veterans returning from Afghanistan and Iraq for post-traumatic stress disorder. And the estimates of those not seeking treatment are much higher. I don't know the last time you walked the halls of an elementary school, but may I suggest that many people without PTSD have a hard time maintaining control as they walk through the halls of an elementary school. What would happen if a veteran struggling with PTSD ended up losing it in front of a class of third graders?
I think that is something that goes well beyond concern that you need to have, because 23 million Americans suffer from the number one disease in this nation, mental illness. This is a segment that's coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder being added to that. I spent the Veterans Day in prison, state penitentiary in the city of Chester, visiting our vets there who came home, and they did not have the VA ready for them, so they turned to dependency upon alcohol or drugs, and that's why 47% of our vets in our Pennsylvania prisons are dependent upon it. And we didn't take care of them in their care, and they ended up making a crime to get the drugs. My issue is this. I also, if I could, another example, there's 12 young men that we shepherd through a community school. My classmate from the Naval Academy who I went in with and runs my office, we meet with them about every 3 months, and 4 have post-traumatic stress disorder where it's been diagnosed, and they say that every time they go in for an interview, people look at them like this. No, I would say that, as you well know, post-traumatic stress disorder began almost as a civilian illness. It happens for children who are in downtown Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. All of a sudden there's a violent act and they suffer. It's a little different, but this is not an uncommon challenge. I think it's wrong just to say because it happens in a warfare, it's that much different than happening in downtown in Los Angeles. And I've sat down with neurosurgeons on this. The issue is this. Are we taking care of our vets? Our inspector voted against post-traumatic stress disorder increases in 2005. He actually, as chairman of the Veterans Committee in 2003 and 4, not only permitted the VA to be underfunded those 2 years, $4 billion, where emergency they had to come back for more money, but stood by as we kicked out of our VA priority 8 vets, low-income vets. And now 1 million men and women can't get access. When we went down to Congress 3 years ago, we now have appropriated $10 billion hard appropriations to put in. I spent a year ago 4 visits in 2 months with the mental health doctors in VA about this issue. How can we better spend the money? I was just in Pittsburgh last week, long-term care, because in long-term care for a VA in Philadelphia when I visited it had been the scene of maggots, live maggots falling out of the wound of one of our vets. I think the greater concern is, are we taking care of our veterans?